I'm Michael Popok, and you're at the intersection of law and politics, the new podcast only on the Midas Touch Network. I'm expressing my First Amendment right to give you honest commentary, and you're expressing your First Amendment right to listen to commentary like this at the marketplace of ideas, in the public square. It's all under attack. It's all under attack by the Trump administration. Your First Amendment right, my First Amendment right, but we're here together on Tuesdays to talk about things honestly, because we got to talk and speak truth to each other before we can even hope to speak truth to power. And it's working. We see it in the poll numbers. We see it in the streets. If there were giant statues of Donald Trump, like any other dictator, they'd already been torn down by the public with ropes. He's down to 38% approval rating, 37% approval rating. More than 63% of America is against Donald Trump and his dictator tendencies. They're against his militarization and federalization of the National Guard to go into blue states. He's against him cutting funding to important programs, to those that help give people dignity and honor and the ability to live. Whether it's welfare programs, it's SNAP, supplemental nutrition programs for children, and the like. They're against his immigration policy. They're against his tariff policy. They're against how he abuses fellow Americans, how he abuses our global allies. And we get to talk about it once a week when we come together here. It is that important. So I have 4 or 5 stories, probably 5 stories that I want to cover with you here at the intersection. And we'll just do a Rorschach test. I'll say a name. You tell me what you think of. Armando Abrego Garcia, 1. Lindsey Halligan, 2. SNAP lawsuit led by 23 attorneys general just filed today. The auto pen and pardon debacle or scandal or report of the Oversight Committee trying to undermine once again Joe Biden. And an appeal filed in the middle of the night by Joe Biden. I'm going to pull all that together with you here at the intersection. Let me start with Kilmer Abrego Garcia, because it's not just about him. Yes, he's being tormented by the federal government and all of its resources. It's about all of us. It's about all of our civil liberties, all of our due process rights. We are Kilmer, and he's fighting a fight in 2 battlefields. One in Tennessee, presided over by Judge Crenshaw, a criminal matter. The second, Judge Zinnes, in his civil rights case. This is the person who was illegally deported to El Salvador, despite having an American court order in his pocket saying he could not be removed, especially to the torture prisons of El Salvador. It took Judge Zinnes several orders, the Fourth Circuit several orders, and the Supreme Court 9-0 to bring him back. When the government brought him back, they trumped up some manufactured charge of human smuggling in Tennessee. And now we've got 2 worlds colliding in the last 24 hours with a new order by Judge Crenshaw and some findings by Judge Zinnes about Abrego Garcia. So the motion to dismiss his indictment for human trafficking, smuggling in Tennessee is coming to a head. And the lawyers for Abrego Garcia let it be known that they want to put on the witness stand Todd Blanche and other members of the Department of Justice. That triggered the Department of Justice, who within days of that sent Abrego Garcia's lawyers a notice in the court, a notice that they're sending him 3,000 miles or more away to Liberia in Africa. He said he was willing to go to Costa Rica. At least it would be near his U.S. citizen family and children, and it's Spanish speaking. You know, he speaks Spanish. We've seen him on the courthouse steps speaking Spanish. He doesn't speak English that well. Sending him to Liberia is not going to be a great idea. That was in retaliation to the lawyers for Abrego Garcia embarrassing the Department of Justice as they move forward with a November 4th and 5th hearing about whether his indictment will be dismissed for a vindictive prosecution. Judge Crenshaw has already indicated that he's likely to grant that motion, but he wants to hear further evidence. And in the meantime, in the last 24 hours, Judge Crenshaw issued an order, which we have up on Legal AF Substack, that gags the federal government from continuing to bash Abrego Garcia and undermine his ability under the Sixth Amendment to have a fair trial. And the judge cited several video attacks of Abrego Garcia, like people like Pam Bondi. Here's a clip of Pam Bondi that got the judge upset. Let's play the clip.
Our government presented El Salvador with an arrest warrant, and they agreed to return him to our country. We're grateful to President Bukele for agreeing to return him to our country to face these very serious charges. This is what American justice looks like. Upon completion of his sentence, we anticipate he will be returned to his home country of El Salvador. The grand jury found that over the past 9 years, Abrego Garcia has played a significant role in an alien smuggling ring. They found this was his full-time job, not a contractor. He was a smuggler of humans and children and women. He made over 100 trips, the grand jury found, smuggling people throughout our country. MS-13 members, violent gang terrorist organization members throughout our country. Thousands of illegal aliens were smuggled. This is especially disturbing because Abrego Garcia is also alleged with transporting minor children. The defendant traded the innocence of minor children for profit. There are even more disturbing facts that the grand jury uncovered. It is alleged this defendant is part of the same smuggling ring responsible for the death of more than 50 migrants in 2021 after the tractor trailer overturned in Mexico. This is part of that same ring. The defendant abused undocumented alien females, according to co-conspirators who were under his control while transporting them throughout our country. This defendant trafficked firearms and narcotics throughout our country on multiple occasions. They were using vehicles, SUVs, with added seats in the back, floors that had been ripped out, guns, narcotics, children, women, MS-13 members. That is what the grand jury found. A co-conspirator alleged that the defendant solicited nude photographs and videos of a minor. A co-conspirator also alleges the defendant played a role in the murder of a rival gang member's mother. These facts demonstrate Abrego Garcia is a danger to our community.
Now, having now gagged them, meaning they can't continue to talk about the case, it was interesting to me that nobody, including the lawyers for Abrego Garcia, didn't raise in the criminal case that they're about to deport him to Liberia. They knew it at the time. I'm surprised they didn't do it. The judge also said he wants more details about the senior lawyers in the office, the Middle District of Tennessee U.S. Attorney's Office, who quit because they wouldn't bring false charges against Abrego Garcia. So Brad Edwards, for instance, he wants more information, the judge, to be sent to him for personal review about that issue. So he ordered that as well. That's on the criminal side. Same 24-hour block, Judge Zinnes pulls everybody together about Liberia. And during that hearing, she says to the lawyers assembled, I don't want him going to Liberia. He's currently in Virginia under her watchful eye in an ICE detention center. I don't want him going to Liberia. Make a representation to me that I don't have to worry in the next few days or hours for him going to Liberia. I'm sure Judge Crenshaw, the criminal judge, doesn't want that either. And we're still waiting for the new filings that will give the judge that assurance. She was not happy in the court during that, and she's trying to consider whether his due process rights are continuing to be violated. I've said, and I'll say it again, I think she has the power to grant him asylum for the abuse of his constitutional rights and as a way to compensate him. That's what I think she should do. And I'll stand by that. But we'll have to continue to watch as the government reacts, overreacts, and is vindictive towards Abrego Garcia in both courts. Speaking of prosecutors for the Department of Justice, but maybe not for long, let me turn to Lindsey Halligan. Lindsey Halligan is in another scandal of her own making. I reported, and I had the pleasure and the honor of interviewing Anna Bauer, a reporter for Lawfare, who received a series of unsolicited Signal app messages from somebody named Lindsey Halligan, who was prosecuting the Letitia James case. Turned out it was Lindsey Halligan. Turned out she wanted to have a dialogue with a reporter, apparently on the record, about the case in real time, including about evidence, including about grand jury information. And Anna Bauer, as any intrepid reporter would do, good reporter would do, published it. And that led to not only the article, my interview with Anna Bauer, but it led to that event being the centerpiece of a couple of different motions and lawsuits. Now, firstly, because Lindsey Halligan admitted that she used the Signal app and its disappearing messaging feature for official communication, she's destroying federal public records. She's destroying federal public records, and she should know better because she was on the team with Todd Blanche, her boss in the Department of Justice, and others when they were the defense lawyers for Donald Trump. And they know what the defense lawyers were able to do to pick apart every little mistake or misstep of a prosecutor, whether it was Fani Willis or it was Letitia James or it was the office of Alvin Bragg, these various places where he was prosecuted, Jack Smith. They wrote the playbook on how to go after the prosecutors. So why are they surprised that the Signal app use and messaging to a reporter would be used by the defense team to seek to gag Lindsey Halligan in one of the motions filed by Letitia James? Let me show you a clip of the interview I just had with Anna Bauer up on Legal AF. And she's hopefully going to be a regular. If you don't know her work, you really need to discover it. She's a reporter's reporter. She's one of the inputs and sources of information that I rely on for my reporting. Really, really insightful work. But here she is in the interview. Let's play a clip.
I think it just kind of underscores that when you're in this like high profile pressure cooker environment, of course, defense counsel is going to like seize on these kinds of public statements, which made it so surprising to me that she was on the record speaking to a reporter about an ongoing case. As for all the reasons that we wrote in the piece, that's just so unusual. And so again, I just think that the fact that this motion was filed kind of speaks to the unusualness and why it seems to be something that was at best misguided in terms of her choice to reach out to a reporter about an ongoing case.
And a couple of days later, you did an update where you said that the DOJ communications person contacted you for the sole purpose of correcting the typo in Lindsey's name. That's
so it was it wasn't too long after we published the piece. It was like 2 hours, I believe it was. They reached out and said that they had realized that they misspelled Miss Halligan's name. Yes.
Yeah.
But other than that, I haven't heard additional commentary from DOJ. As I understand it, I believe that they gave a comment to a different outlet in which they described me as a blogger as opposed to a journalist. But other than that, we have not had any additional commentary from DOJ asking for a correction. It was just that misspelling that they provided in the statement.
But that's not the only thing that happened bad to Lindsey Halligan based on the signal messaging. Again, this is a government who at the start of its administration had another signal gate problem. When Mike Waltz, the national security advisor then, sent to Iceland as an ambassador now, accidentally or on purpose included Jeffrey Goldberg, another reporter, the editor-in-chief of The Atlantic, to a signal chat to talk about whether they were going to bomb the Houthis in Yemen or not, a military action. Now, I hope people aren't getting too fatigued by all of Donald Trump's 15 different attacks in Venezuelan waters, Caribbean waters, and Pacific waters against people without due process. But back in the start of the administration, there was this entire signal chain about the bombing that included the reporter and J.D. Vance and Stephen Miller and Pete Hegseth and Marco Rubio and Tulsi Gabbard. And it was the subject of a lawsuit by a group called American Oversight. And a judge said, you can't use Signal. You need to preserve Signal. You can't use the disappearing messaging feature for public records. Apparently, Lindsey Halligan never got that memo. Maybe it was on a disappearing app like Signal. So American Oversight has made a demand, and we have the rumblings of a new lawsuit, sent to Marco Rubio, who's the ethicist for America. No, he's the archivist. Couldn't be the ethicist. He's the temporary archivist in charge of public records, not just the Secretary of State, in which they're demanding all Signal messages and all her use of Signal messages not only be preserved, but that it be shown to the American people what she destroyed. And they also point out that she effectively threatened the reporter by telling her, you're getting your reporting wrong. You know, if I were you, it was sort of a not so subtle threat to try to chill her First Amendment expression. And now we bring it, since we're still talking about Lindsey Halligan and James Comey, because she's the prosecutor for the former FBI director, and Letitia James, where we had just had the arraignment of Letitia James, in which she very valiantly and with great conviction and courage said, in effect, I'm not going anywhere. I'm not going to let them crush me. I'm going to stand up for the American people. There's a motion pending about whether Lindsey Halligan lives or dies. No, it's not Hunger Games. In being a prosecutor. Was she properly appointed as Eastern District of Virginia prosecutor or not? And everybody that's looked at it, including me, says she wasn't. She was illegally appointed because there was already an interim U.S. attorney named Eric Siebert, a Republican who Donald Trump didn't like because he refused to indict he refused to indict James Comey and Letitia James. He got fired, but he was the one and only interim U.S. attorney. The next stop is Donald Trump's got to get somebody through the Senate. And in the interim, there needs to be somebody appointed by the judges of the Eastern District of Virginia. That's how it works under a statute we call Section 546. So the motions are both almost identical, Comey and Letitia James. And the issue is there's a conflict of interest with the judges of the Eastern District of Virginia because they would pick the next U.S. attorney if she gets bounced. So the motion has been sent off, as I predicted, through the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals Chief Judge, Judge Diaz, who sits over North Carolina, South Carolina, and Virginia, to a South Carolina judge to decide. And the motions have been consolidated, so they're going to be heard together. Who's the judge? Judge Curry, senior status judge in her mid-70s. She was appointed by Bill Clinton. I just think it's so perfect that they sent it to South Carolina, the home of the other Lindsey, Senator Lindsey Graham. They picked a federal judge that he probably supported because he had to have given his blue slip to support her, those many years ago. She's been on the bench for 1 million years. She's a resident of Florence, South Carolina. She worked in the Department of Justice in D.C. and in South Carolina. She's a very confident and credible judge. Judge Curry's going to be making this decision sooner rather than later because the trials of Tish James and James Comey are in January coming up. So we're going to be doing a lot of reporting about that. But if you're Letitia James and James Comey, you got to be happy with the pick of the Clinton appointee, Curry. The rest of the motions on vindictive prosecution and on the gag orders, they stay with the two trial judges, Judge Nachmanoff, the judge who's a Biden appointee for James Comey, and Judge Walker, who's a Biden appointee for Letitia James in the Eastern District of Virginia. Just this one motion to DQ, disqualify, goes off to South Carolina and all of that. So that's where we are with Lindsey Halligan. Maybe you shouldn't appoint a novice with 7 years legal experience and having never been a federal prosecutor, let alone being in federal court. Maybe you shouldn't appoint them to be the top 5 federal prosecutor in America. How about that? Let me move on. Got a lot of interviews. You just saw one that I did with Anna Bauer, and I've got one coming up. Actually, I'm going to be recording it tonight, late, with Attorney General Rob Bonta, who I had the distinct pleasure of doing the interview with on No King's Day in California. And AG Bonta is back to talk about today a powerful new lawsuit filed on behalf of tens of millions of impoverished Americans or whose children need nutrition. It's the Supplemental Nutrition Program, the SNAP program. Between 20 and 40 million children and babies need this in order to survive. And Donald Trump is playing politics and Russian roulette with their lives because he wants to blame the Democrats for taking food out of their mouth and nutrition out of their mouth when nothing could be further from the truth. There's a secret memo, which I actually got my hands on. I'm going to put it up in Legal AF Substack. Back in September, before the shutdown, every agency had to come up with a contingency plan, and the U.S. Department of Agriculture, which is part of the food distribution, nutrition distribution apparatus of America, prepared a report that said they had a rainy day fund of up to $6 billion, that they understood that Congress wanted the SNAP program and other welfare and food stamp type programs to be up and running. And then somebody, if I had to guess, Russ Vought, who's the chair of the Office of Management and Budget. He's the director of Office of Management and Budget. He's the creator of the Project 2025. He, along with Stephen Miller, said, let's screw the Democrats and their efforts to try to ensure that 22 million Americans, many of the same overlapping families, don't lose Obamacare, don't lose their health care. We're talking about Americans here. Every time I say anything in this segment, we're talking about Americans, not illegal immigrants. And so they're holding it hostage, and they're holding babies and children's lives hostage and threatening to shoot and not release the $6 billion. So there already was a secret memo that was taken down from the website of the U.S. Department of Agriculture. We have it. We found it because that was in September. Beginning of October, they said, we got the $6 billion. It's rainy day. We're going to be distributing it to cover the payments for November, which is about $8 billion. Then somebody thought better of it. And 2 weeks later said, there are no more funds, and then posted a callous message that we would like to distribute the funds if only the Democrats and the radical Democrats would stop holding the government hostage. Talk about inhumanely hitting the government or hitting Americans and making them suffer. In fact, I have a clip from a Midas Touch simulcast or broadcast of a press conference just today about the lawsuit filed and led by California by 23 attorneys general, got filed in the District of Massachusetts in order to get those funds, that rainy day fund, paid out to Americans. Let's play the clip.
I'm going to kick it off here today to announce California's latest lawsuit against the federal government, and specifically the U.S. Department of Agriculture, also known as USDA. and Secretary Brooke Rollins. Using the current federal shutdown as a scapegoat, USDA has unlawfully suspended funds for the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, SNAP, for the first time in the program's history, informing state agencies that the federal government will withhold all November benefit payments. Trump and Rollins are cutting off benefits for more than 41 million Americans, red states and blue states, folks who rely on SNAP to put food on the table, even though there are billions of dollars in contingency funds and other funds that could be used to provide SNAP benefits during the shutdown. They are doing this on purpose. It is deliberate. It is intentional. They have the funds. They're just not using them. The vast majority of SNAP recipients are families with kids, elderly individuals, and people with disabilities. These are our most vulnerable. Society should be judged on how we treat the most vulnerable. Trump gets an F for what he is doing here to our kids and to our most vulnerable Americans. Here in California, our SNAP program, CalFresh, supports 5.5 million Californians every month, including 1.9 million children. All of them are counting on this program. They're counting on their government to follow through on its promise and to provide the support that they need. In abruptly suspending SNAP, Trump and Rollins have broken the law. They have forced states to scramble to try and clean up the federal government's mess. And worst of all, they've left 41 million Americans unsure of where their next meal will come from. With today's lawsuit, our coalition of 23 attorneys general and 3 governors who are standing up for the people in their state have made it clear that we refuse to stand by and allow the Trump administration to arbitrarily and unlawfully do away with a decades-old safety net program, the country's most important tool for fighting against hunger.
And as I said, we had the Pam Bondi clip. Now we got the Rob Bonta clip. I'm going to be doing another interview of Rob Bonta about that lawsuit. It'll be up on Midas Touch and Legal AF tomorrow. They're seeking a temporary restraining order, as they should. They got all the blue state Democrats. I guess the other states don't care. I guess the red states don't care about their children of their state dying from malnutrition. We do. That's a reflection of our values as a party and the values of the Democratic Party. So I think that's very important. When we come back, I want to talk in detail about this auto pen pardon fake scandal that the Oversight Committee, who apparently has time to issue reports, but no time run by MAGA to help the American people at all. And so they issue a report. It's all choreographed with Pam Bondi, who says we're looking into it to try to undo pardons and clemency. Not going to work. There's no judge that's going to allow this. Pardons have been a part of life since 1803. Thomas Jefferson issued one of the first pardons. They don't have to be done in writing at all. There's no evidence that Joe Biden wasn't compos mentis, didn't know what he was doing when he signed it. In fact, he's already been interviewed, not by the Oversight Committee, but he's been interviewed and said he knew exactly what he was doing when he authorized several thousand pardons and commutations. I mean, what they think? He was going to sit down and sign 2,500? I don't think Donald Trump signed 2,500 to cover the Jan 6th pardons. You know, he did it with like one signature. But, you know, we had individual signatures for 2,500 people, and nobody would ever expect him not to use an auto pen. And Trump used an auto pen as well. I'll cover that. And I want to talk about the new appeal that's been filed, and another interview I'll be doing tomorrow of Governor Shapiro about a voting rights lawsuit and what Pennsylvania intends to do about it. So a lot to cover, many ways to support what we do at the intersection. As I said at the top, First Amendment speech is being crushed or attempted to be crushed by the Trump administration. So in order to fight back, there's ways to do it. The subscriber base for Midas Touch and for Legal AF YouTube channel is very important. to keeping us on the air, to keeping the content in, to getting the interviews that we want. Because the bigger we are, the more your voice can be heard, because we're able to expand our network, our interviews, our team, and all of that. So hit the free subscribe button on Midas. Come over to Legal AF YouTube. We're going to hit 900,000, I think, over the weekend, on our way to 1 million subscribers in just over a year. Okay, we built this for the break the glass moment, and now we need your help. No paywall, no outside investors. Hit the Legal AF subscription button. Then we formed this Legal AF Substack, where in 4 or 5 months, we have 100,000 subscribers. And there we're putting in real time, live reporting, articles, analysis, all these filings that I talk about that you can get. And if you can swing a paid membership, which is less than $7 a month, not a week, will overwhelm you with a return on your investment that like a cornucopia of information at the intersection of law and politics. So those are the ways to support what we do. The Intersection as a podcast doing great because of you. Come over to the audio platforms of Spotify or Apple and look for the Intersection. Leave comments. I think we've got 300 or 400 reviews. Let's up that number. It's the hummingbird theory. It all helps keep us in the top 100 of all YouTube channels and to break into the top 100 of audio podcasts. And we've built a tremendous audience here at the Intersection, and I do appreciate you. And then, of course, we've got some sponsors that support what we do as well. And here's a word from our sponsors. Delete Me makes it easy, quick, and safe to remove your personal data online at a time when surveillance and data breaches are common enough to make everyone vulnerable. As someone with an active online presence, privacy is really important to me. I've seen firsthand how easy it is for personal information to end up in places you'd never expect. Have you ever been a victim of identity theft? I have. Harassment, doxing. If you haven't, you probably know someone who has. Delete Me can help. They do all the hard work of wiping your and your family's personal information from hundreds of data broker websites. You just sign up, tell Delete Me what information you want removed, and their experts take it from there. They even send you regular personalized privacy reports showing what info they found, where they found it, and what they removed. And it's not a one-time thing. Delete Me is constantly monitoring and removing the personal information you don't want online. The New York Times Wirecutter has even named Delete Me their top pick for data removal services. Take control of your data and keep your private life private by signing up for Delete Me. Now at a special discount for our listeners. Get 20% off your Delete Me plan when you go to joindeleteme.com/legalaf and use promo code legalaf at checkout. The only way to get 20% off is to go to joindeleteme.com/legalaf and enter code legalaf at checkout. One more time, that's joindeleteme.com/legalaf, code legalaf. You know, my cat Chanel, she recently decided that the new plant on my desk is her personal jungle gym. Every time I walk by, I find her perched on top, knocking leaves over like it's her full-time job. I love spending time with her. That's why I order Smalls cat food, fresh protein-rich meals that support cat health and happiness. This podcast is sponsored by Smalls. Listeners know Chanel simply cannot live without Smalls. For a limited time, get 60% off your first order plus free shipping when you head to smalls.com/legalaf. Smalls cat food is protein-packed recipes made with preservative-free ingredients you'll find in your own fridge, and it's delivered right to your door. That's why Cats.com named Smalls their best overall cat food. Starting with Smalls is easy. Just share info about your cat's diet, health, and food preferences. Then Smalls puts together a personalized sampler for your cat. No more guessing between random brands at the store. Chanel's favorite flavor is chicken and turkey feast, and honestly, she prefers Smalls way more than her previous cat food. Look, I did a little taste test. No, not that kind. 2 bowls side by side, and she went straight for Smalls. Since switching, Chanel has had fewer hairballs, more balanced energy, a healthier weight, softer fur, and a less stinky litter box. Still not a believer? Forbes ranked Smalls the best overall cat food, and BuzzFeed said, my cats went completely ballistic for this stuff. What are you waiting for? Give your cat the food she deserves. For a limited time, because you are a Legal AF listener, get 60% off your first order plus free shipping when you head to smalls.com/legalaf. One last time, that's 60% off your first order plus free shipping at smalls.com/legalaf. Welcome back to The Intersection. Let's get to the auto pen BS, shall we? The pardon power, the power of the presidency to pardon is in the Constitution. It doesn't say you have to use a pen. It doesn't say you have to use a piece of paper. It doesn't say you have to sign it yourself, it doesn't say there even has to be anything. It could be oral. It is a pardon of the president to power. It is unlimited. It can't be challenged. It is what it is. It's been going on since the 1700s. Thomas Jefferson used an auto pen or a version of it in 1803. Trump used auto pens. Just because in his final days when he pardoned all the Jan 6ers, at the beginning of this term when he pardoned all the Jan 6ers, he did it in one 2-line pardon instead of individual pardons. That doesn't make a pardon valid or invalid. But the Oversight Committee, which is Donald Trump's hand puppet, led by Jim Jordan, did a whole BS 90-page report, which they interviewed a lot of Biden aides about what he did or didn't know at any given time. Look, Joe Biden has already given public statements in July, if not later, in which he said he was compos mentis. He had all of his faculties. He knew what he was doing, and everybody knew it, and the auto pen was at his direction on every one of those sentences. You may not like the sort of sundowning of Joe Biden towards the very end, but it doesn't mean he wasn't competent to do his job, just as Ronald Reagan, who was in the throes of dementia, we now know, and Nancy Reagan running the office. Nobody's going back and challenging the last year of the Reagan administration at all. But, Trump's been trolling Biden and therefore trying to undermine the Democratic brand since he's been in office. He put all the photos of the president in the walkway leading to the Rose Garden or whatever's left of the Rose Garden these days. And he put an auto pen with Joe Biden's signature instead of his photo. It's ridiculous. He should worry about greater things. While Americans suffer, he's building a golden ballroom and took a wrecking ball to the White House. Why doesn't he just knock over the White House and say, oops, I want to start over again? It's the people's house. He's scarring it. And now we've got the reporting, for instance, that Benny Thompson of the Jan 6 committee just sent a demand letter on letterhead to every corporate contributor to that ballroom about how they've contributed to the ripping a hole in the heart of America and tearing down the East Wing, which had been the repository of everything that's great in this country and about first ladies, which is where their offices were, until it was destroyed by Donald Trump in a peak of anger and spending money that he doesn't have, redirecting money away for research and development and slush funds, and trying to prop up his ballroom, which has now gone up 50% in price, and he's only been at it for about a month and a half. So this auto pen, Pam Bondi, who is a lowlight, who is a crash test dummy when it comes to being a lawyer of any repute. She's not smart. She never was considered smart. That's not how she got her jobs in Florida as the attorney general, or as the impeachment lawyer for Donald Trump. And for her to say, well, we're looking into it. We're going to go look at all of these things. It's just another way for Donald Trump to try to troll the Democrats, undermine the brand, get to a one-party system. He's doing it with attacking voting, trying to suppress your vote, trying to make it harder for you to vote, trying to take away all the Democratic advantages. And now he's going after the icons and the idols of the Democratic Party, right? Letitia James, Bill Clinton, Barack Obama, and Joe Biden, et cetera, et cetera. But I will repeat, there is nothing in the Constitution that says it has to be done in writing. Presidents going back to Thomas Jefferson have used auto pens. Donald Trump used an auto pen. And I think the interesting missing part of the Oversight Committee report, we're going to post that on Legal AF Substack as well, is they never interviewed Joe Biden. How about interviewing Joe Biden? No, they didn't want to interview Joe Biden. They wanted to edit and leak and cut and paste to make their argument, to give Pam Bondi, who's floundering as the Attorney General and the Department of Justice, some sort of lifeline to prop her up. And we'll continue to follow that story on The Intersection and on the Legal AF YouTube channel. Now, in the middle of the night, literally, Donald Trump finally got around to filing his appeal of his 34-count criminal conviction in New York. You may recall that Donald Trump is the only president to have ever been convicted of felonies and the only president with a felony record to become president again. In the 34 count, there were the prosecutors, which were the Manhattan District Attorney's Office, convinced a jury of 12 in New York of Donald Trump's peers, 12-0, that he committed effectively two crimes. The crime of business record fraud in the Stormy Daniels election interference hush money cover-up case, where two out of the three members of that conspiracy testified against him, David Pecker of the National Enquirer and Michael Cohen, his former lawyer. And that was done in conjunction, as the jury concluded, to support a second crime, which in this case was election interference. Put those two things together, you get a felony. Now, Judge Merchan didn't sentence Donald Trump to jail time. He suspended his sentence, but kept the felony on the books. Suspended the judgment, if you will. Now Donald Trump has hired lawyers at Sullivan and Cromwell. I just did a new hot take video that's up on Legal AF exploring their conflicts of interest to file his appeal. The top story is not he filed an appeal raising the shop-worn arguments, tired arguments that have failed before. Oh, Judge Merchan's daughter worked for a Democratic strategy and fundraising company, so he should recuse himself. Why? She's allowed to have, this is 2025. Daughters and wives are allowed to have jobs. That doesn't mean that it disqualifies their husband. So says the ethics rules. Oh, he contributed $25 or something to Act Blue once. He was cleared of any ethical violation related to that. There's nothing in Judge Merchan's actions, his background, his history, his statements that indicate that he is unethical, as opposed to all the people that are in the Department of Justice. It's always ironic when the Trump administration or Donald Trump is arguing about somebody else's ethics, right? Like Lindsey Halligan talking about the ethics of Pat Fitzgerald, the lawyer for James Comey, Always shocking. So Sullivan and Cromwell has been the government's lawyers trying to negotiate against other law firms to get them to settle with Donald Trump, like Paul Weiss, then flipping sides and becoming Donald Trump's lawyer, while at the same time their firm is rewarded by having the U.S. attorney in Manhattan be one of their partners, with a revolving door that just reeks of corruption and lack of ethics. That's what I read when I read the new filing. I read the filing by the Sullivan and Cromwell firm and its vice chairman. And I saw corruption and lack of ethics related to it. Now, it's at the First Department Appellate Division in New York, of which I'm a member. It's the same appellate court, not the same panel, though, that ruled sort of for Donald Trump on the fraud case. Sullivan Cromwell brought that too, because they kept the fraud in place, but they knocked down the $468 million judgment. And that's up on appeal to the Court of Appeals, which in New York is the Supreme Court, the highest court. So we'll see what's going to happen. I'm sure Trump's going to lose at the First Department Appellate Court. And then it's going to go to the Court of Appeals. But the story is a lack of ethics of the Sullivan Cromwell firm in New York. And, major firms in New York all ran away from Donald Trump, found him radioactive in 2020, especially in his role in Jan 6 and the insurrection. But then he went after all of them and got 14 of them to bend the knee. and to agree to get rid of their diversity, equity, and inclusion programs, to get rid of their pro bono programs, to support people who needed help but couldn't afford it, and give $1 billion worth of free legal service to the Trump administration, some of which are being used on these illegal tariffs that are about to be hopefully declared illegal by the United States Supreme Court. So that's the takeaway from the Trump appeal. Finally, let me just touch on what is coming up at the United States Supreme Court. On the 5th of November, and we'll have it up on Legal AF YouTube, there's going to be an oral argument about whether Donald Trump's tariffs are legal or not. I wouldn't say constitutional, but it is constitutional, because he claims his powers come from something called the International Economic Emergency, the International Economic Emergency Powers Act, IEPA. And when he got, but there has to be an emergency, and there's nothing in the IEPA about tariffs. So he's already lost at two other top courts, the International Court of Trade and the Federal Circuit Court of Appeals. Now it's up at the Supreme Court. Now there's briefs coming in all left and right. States and economists and others, Chamber of Commerce, are all writing telling the Supreme Court to find that the tariffs are illegal. That would be a $1 trillion setback for Donald Trump. It's the hallmark, it's the foundation, the linchpin of his domestic and foreign policy. So there's going to be all those briefs. There's going to be all those arguments. The Wall Street Journal just came out and told the Supreme Court they should tear down the tariffs and find them to be unconstitutional. So we're going to have to follow that, because they should under IEPA. And the reason that Donald Trump was triggered by Doug Ford of Ontario last weekend, where they ran the Reagan clip talking in 1987 about why tariffs are bad, and while he was going to have to do a tariff against Japan about the semiconductor war, the chip war at the time, they generally are unpatriotic and bad. Donald Trump didn't like that. Now, Ronald Reagan was a free trader. He wasn't a tariffer. And the courts have ruled that what he did against Japan in 1987 was not a tariff. It was really a sanction, but not a tariff on 138 countries, which can only be done by Congress under the Constitution. And that's what the Supreme Court, that's where the rubber meets the road with the Supreme Court. I like doing this show with you. You know, I think you know me from Legal AF. I've been doing it 5 years now, Wednesdays with Karen Friedman Agnifilo, Saturdays with my co-founder, Ben Meisalis. You see me in about 40 videos a week. But here, it's different. My approach is different here at the intersection. And I'm so glad that you have found this show to be rewarding for you and you're part of this audience. Don't forget the ways to support us. Come over to Legal AF YouTube. Help us cross that 1 million subscriber barrier. Subscriber base is what drives YouTube, and it's what drives the Legal AF ecosystem, and we need it. Take a second, just check to see if maybe you've subscribed already. Just go and check, and you'll know. Come over to Legal AF Substack, and become a member, and think about becoming a paid member for $6.77 a month. That's how we, frankly, keep the lights on. That's how we pay the editors. That's how we pay the bills. That's how we get the research teams. That's how we do our work here. We're on a shoestring, but that pays for the shoestring. And we could really use your help there. And that's the way to do it. Of course, we've got our sponsors. We've got this podcast, which you can vote and take a receipt. Go over on the audio podcast platforms. Watch us on YouTube. Of course, leave comments here. Come over to the audio podcast platforms and leave 5-star reviews and notes there as well. So I'm glad you're here. You'll see me on the Midas Touch channel, on Legal AF, on the Legal AF midweek edition of Legal AF. That's tomorrow. And on the interviews that I've got coming up. Rob Bonta, Attorney General of California, you'll see me with tomorrow. Governor Shapiro of Pennsylvania in the next 24 hours. And then lastly, in the middle of November, on the 19th of November, I have the pleasure and honor of hosting or being asked to interview, if you will, as many of 23 Democratic attorneys general as I can get into a room in Arizona during one of their conferences. I'll be interviewing them in panels. I'll be interviewing them one-on-one. You need to hear about the first responders that are protecting our Constitution and our rule of law, and that is the attorneys general for the blue states. And I will have them on Legal AF and on the Midas Touch Network. So thanks for being here. Until my next report, I'm Michael Popok. I'm Michael Popok, and I got some big news for our audience. Most of you know me as the co-founder of Midas Touch's Legal AF and the Legal AF YouTube channel, or as a 35-year national trial lawyer. Now, building on what we started together on Legal AF, I've launched a new law firm, the Popok Firm, dedicated to obtaining justice through compassionate and zealous legal representation. At the Popok Firm, we are focused on obtaining justice for those who have been injured or damaged by a life-altering event by securing the highest dollar recoveries. I've been tirelessly fighting for justice for the last 35 years, so my own law firm organically building on my Legal AF work just feels right. And I've handpicked a team of top-tier trial fighters and settlement experts throughout all 50 states known as big auto injury attorneys who have the know-how to beat heartless insurance companies, corporations, government entities, and their attorneys. Big Auto's attorneys working with my firm are rock stars in their respective states and collectively responsible for billions of dollars in recoveries. So if you or a loved one have been on the wrong side of a catastrophic auto, motor vehicle, rideshare, or truck accident, suffered a personal injury, or been the victim of medical malpractice, employment harassment or discrimination, or suffered a violation of your civil and constitutional rights, then contact the Popok Firm today at 1-877-POPOK-AF or by visiting my website at www.thepopokfirm.com and fill out a free case evaluation form. And if we determine that you have a case and you sign with us, we don't get paid unless you do. The Popok Firm, fighting for your justice